Because what I want to remind us of today, especially now, 3 weeks before an election, 3 weeks before who knows what is going to happen in this world that is changing, a change that we have called forth, where our structures have shifted and some of them crumbling, some of them being requalified. This is the time for us to notice and to turn within to ourselves and to surrender these coping mechanisms and to adopt a new one, to remember our spiritual practice. I'd like to introduce to you a true thought principle, an axiom, a rule, and it is this. Take a breath with me. The only relationship of value and that matters is my relationship with God, with Source, with love.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today on True Thought. It's my pleasure and honor to be your host today. I'm Brother T, one of the co-founders of True Thought. The other co-founder is my beautiful wife, Rev René. She's going to be your inspirational speaker today. I would invite you also, if you find value, click the like button. If you would help us out, that'll help the YouTube system to share this with more people to get this message of truth. Also, you can find us online at truethought.org. You can find us on our Facebook page at One True Thought. And also, we do appreciate if you'd like to join our email list. You'll get invitations to the intimate gatherings we have online with Zoom sessions where we get together and we discuss the principles of True Thought. We're so glad that you're here today. Before we begin, I'm going to ask you to join me and take a good deep breath right now, and let's just join together in a moment of silence. As we come together, I'm so very grateful for this time with you and that you're spending this time with our community, and we truly are blessed because of your presence. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my beautiful wife, Rev René, for her inspirational message today. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm actually really touched by your presence here today. Thank you for taking the time to spend with us for an inspirational message. Today, I will be sharing with you a story, and embedded in the story will be another true thought principle and a spiritual lesson that we can actually utilize during this particular time in our lives. And so what I want to share with you, the story, is the story of this little kitty being that has come to be in our home and in our lives. And her name is Isabel. And Isabel came to be with us just about exactly a year ago. And so we've been celebrating our little anniversary together this week. And what I want to share with you is that we came to find her, to find one another truly, about a year ago when Brother T and I decided that we needed a little break. We needed to disengage from our day-to-day life and from the spiritual community that we were serving, the work that we were doing, our day-to-day life. And so we decided just to take a little retreat not far from where we currently live in Liberty, Tennessee. There's a hermitage there. And I had been there before when I needed a little break, and I thought, we'll return there. And just to set the scene, it's rolling hills, it's in the woods. There are four buildings on the property, two cabins, one in which we stayed in, the other one was empty. And then there's a church and then a home where the custodian of the property lives. And when we checked in, she shared with us, there's a cat. Somebody had left a cat by the church. And I was like, and she really wanted us to know that. And at that time, I was not really interested in taking a little kitty being into our lives. So I kind of dismissed it and went about our retreat. Well, the following day, we go for a walk, and the woman is in the distance where the church is, and she's like, pointing down like this, like, the cat's right here. The cat's right here. You might want to come and see her. And we're in the distance. Okay, thank you. And so we go for our walk. And as we come down the hill, approaching the church property where this cat is, we begin to see her in the distance. And she's on the corner of the building, and I approach her very slowly, and I sit in the grass, and Tony comes up with me, and she comes right to us. She not only comes right to us, she kind of sits in my lap for a minute, and then she rubs up against us, and she had this little squeaky like meow. It was kind of a mute meow where she was going meow, but it was like a little squeak. And so we're just sitting there with her, and all of a sudden I look at Tony and he looks at me, and we're like, oh my gosh, we're in love. And it was this moment of just kind of knowing we were going to be together. But as I was looking at her, she hadn't been fed the whole week that she had been there. She was clearly a domesticated cat, not a feral cat, clearly used to contact with humans, and had, I'm assuming, at one point been really well cared for. And here she was, and I'm looking around, how was she surviving? And I knew that in her world had been so turned upside down, that she had been left and abandoned and left to fend for herself, and not really fully equipped to do so, not fully trained to do so. And so, the fatigue and the wear and the tear showed in who she was and how she was behaving. And so what was really clear to me was that she was ready to come home. She was ready to come home to safety. And she had chosen Tony and me as her new home. And once we brought her back, it was as if she had always been with us. And as I was contemplating the conversation today and looking around our home and just noticing how in a year, how while she was immediately comfortable with being in our safe home and being cared for, it has taken that amount of time for this space to truly become her own. And what I notice is that, yes, she's comfortable in our house, in our home, but that within our home, within the zone of safety, that she actually has what we jokingly refer to as her like safe spots, or her spots where it's okay for us to brush her and love on her. And one of them's this ramp. And throughout the day, like, she'll run ahead of me and go to the ramp. And that's the signal, yes, you can pet me and love on me and brush me. And it's so cute and adorable. And more she runs to that ramp. And she has a bed that it took almost a year for her to take to, but now, she'll be all comfortable and safe in this fluffy bed that we got for her. But the one thing that is always remains is this perch. We have a perch before the window. And I always thought, oh, it's the window, it's location that brings her there. But really, it's the perch itself. She feels safe in it. And how do I know this? Because when we video and do things, we move it sometimes. And no matter where we move it, she sits in it and watches us. So she feels safe there. She feels safe. And so reflecting back on how it was when we first met her and how she first came into our lives, what was evidence to us was that she was fatigued. And what is fatigue? Fatigue is an extreme tiredness from mental or physical exertion or illness. She was fatigued. She slept a lot. She ate more than usual, and she needed to feel that home, that safety, that nurturing. And it took time for her fatigue to diminish. Now take a breath with me. How many of us are feeling fatigued right now? I came across, a word called, a phrase called COVID fatigue, and it was embedded in an article, and it can be connected with the idea of the fatigue, the unique fatigue that individuals who contract the COVID coronavirus, they report having this fatigue that lasts for a long time. But it also refers to a societal fatigue that we are experiencing in our culture, and this idea of the We've been expecting the surge, the autumn surge in coronavirus cases, and the fatigue that we have felt and experienced from this whole experience, but from lockdowns and from quarantines and from wearing masks and from social distancing, that, we're already fatigued by these practices, and how can we incorporate them again? And it got me thinking about this idea of fatigue and how really in some ways some of us are experiencing economic fatigue, where, we're either living from paycheck to paycheck, or we've lost our jobs, or there's been some sort of shift in the way that we experience our livelihood. And even globally, their conversation of the economy and what it is and might be going through as the fatigue of what we've been experiencing. And then I was thinking, well, gosh, you could also add environmental fatigue, the fatigue of decades and decades of improper practices and how we treat our environment, that there's some fatigue with that, and even the fatigue of the conversation of climate change. And then here we are 3 weeks away from a political election. How many of us feel fatigued by the polarity that we're experiencing in our country, and fatigued from that polarity, the argument, the blaming, the making wrong, and the sides that are taken? I would suggest that if you're feeling fatigued right now, as I have been feeling lately, really, actually, I couldn't even identify it, but it was like this fatigue of it all. I'm here to say that it's okay, that there is a way for us to restore ourselves to our nature, to our sanity, even to our sense of safety, even in the midst of this chaos that is creating this fatigue. Now, for each of us, we all have ways of being when we are fatigued, and we can beat ourselves up when we see what I'm going to call coping mechanisms rise up. And coping mechanisms can be positive or negative, but what I'm going to be talking about initially here is what I might call a negative coping mechanism, which might be a way in which I distract. It's a strategy or an adaptation that I might rely on in order to manage stress, but it becomes what was once maybe a healthy tool or distraction, then becomes what is fatiguing in and of itself in order to maintain. And so some examples of that is, like, for instance, right now we're seeing the rise of addictions. We're seeing the rise of people who are slipping into using substances, drugs and alcohol, and perhaps gambling and other ways of distracting from the fatigue, from the stress. But when we do that, it creates and builds more fatigue and more stress. So it's an unhealthy coping mechanism. And so I'm going to ask you to take a breath. Is there a behavior that has arisen within you? Maybe it's an old behavior that you thought you didn't partake in anymore, that all of a sudden you are. And you're like wondering, oh my gosh. Like for me, I noticed that, and I've heard of the COVID-10 or the COVID-15, kind of like the freshman 10 or 15, where you gain a little bit of weight. Maybe for me, I'm beginning to use food or distract with media and television. I mean, we weren't meant to binge watch, a whole series within a weekend. And now they say that the binge watching is just, through the roof, and social media and the distraction even of our political news, that some of us have been called news junkies. And so I just invite you to think of the ways that you manage the stress in your life that could be called a coping mechanism, and just, become aware of it. And in our awareness of it, we don't need to beat ourselves up. No, it is a time to be gentle, a time to be aware, a time to notice, and then a time to remember. Because what I want to remind us of today, especially now, 3 weeks before an election, 3 weeks before who knows what is going to happen in this world that is changing, a change that we have called forth, where our structures have shifted and some of them crumbling, some of them being requalified. This is the time for us to notice and to turn within to ourselves and to surrender these coping mechanisms and to adopt a new one, to remember our spiritual practice. I'd like to introduce to you a true thought principle, an axiom, a rule, and it is this. Take a breath with me. The only relationship of value and that matters is my relationship with God, with Source, with love, period, period, period. Now, scripturally, and in the Hebrew scripture, one of the very first commandments was this. It was to have no idols before God, no false idols before God. Well, you know, those coping mechanisms become idols before God. They become ways like the golden calf of old, or worshiping form and not worshiping spirit, God, Source, eternal being, life. Then the things that we distract from in our fatigue then become those idols before God. It is also said scripturally and has been said, that God is a jealous God. And I've been contemplating, it's the same thing. What does that mean? Because I don't believe that there's a being called God that would be jealous. God does not behold inequity. That which created all that is in love and after love does not behold anything other than love. And so these aspects that arise from a mind that has separated itself from God, from all that is, that mind might experience jealousy, but God doesn't. But what it's trying to say to us, again, is the same thing, is to have nothing and no one before that primary relationship from which all relationships come, from which our safety lies, and from which our sanity abides. You see, when we are fatigued, and we're fatigued over a long period of time, we're not in our right mind. We're not thinking clearly. We're not coming from our power or source and our strength. When we're fatigued, we're afraid. When we're afraid, we try to protect ourselves. And when we try to protect ourselves, we separate ourselves off from those, our brothers and sisters, and the world, and from God in our fear and fatigue. We become insane, and we believe that things like the coping mechanisms, excesses of drug or food or alcohol or social media or news junkie or those type of things, we believe that then becomes our source, our strength, our distraction from the pain that we're experiencing. So in that insanity, we have in recognizing the coping mechanisms, we have the opportunity to return to sanity and to return to our place of safety. And we do that by giving our full attention and appreciation to God, to love, to spirit. The only relationship of value, especially now, is my relationship with Source. I think again of Isabel on her perch. It's her place of safety. that it's where she goes to when she's feeling a little off, a little bit fatigued, a little unsure, a little afraid. And so I ask us, where's our place of safety? Where's our perch, if you will? Our place of safety, of protection, our return to ourselves, which is our return to sanity. There's a practice that I'd like to share with you of how I do this. And I'm going to invite you to just become still with me for a moment and to turn within. You see, everything hinges upon this. We've been talking about a lot of true thought principles over the past many weeks. And everything begins with divine identity and this divine relationship with God. And when we make that the main thing, we actually do return home to our safety without ever journeying anywhere physically, without ever doing anything in the world. It's where our peace abides. And I'm going to suggest to you that we can let this be our spiritual activism, our spiritual coping mechanism, our restoration to sanity and perfect safety by this practice. And so what I do is this. I pause right where I am. Now, in my home, I might burn a little bit of sage. I might burn a little bit of San Palo wood, and just that scent and that burning. I release the world. I release these coping mechanisms, the negative ones. I release what's going on in the world. I turn within. I symbolize that by closing the body eyes. And as I turn within, I say this: as Christ, in perfect safety, I release all tension. Now I'm going to unpack this. As Christ, you could substitute the word as love, as my divine self, as the awakened one. Because there is an aspect of you that is larger than you think, that is already awakened. That's the aspect we court right now. So as Christ, as love, I'm in that perch. I'm in my perfect safety right there in that holy instant when I connect with my divine identity that God and I are one. That's what the Christ is. It's the remembrance of my identity that Christ and I, God and I are one. And so as Christ in this perfect safety, I release all tension. I let it go. I release the fatigue. I release these coping mechanisms. I release the world. I let it go. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to make anything happen out there. I begin within as Christ. In perfect safety, I release all tension. And then I say the following: as Christ, in perfect safety, I dissolve my mind into the perfect peace of God. You see, my safety and sanity lies here and nowhere else. There is no idol of the world that can satisfy my need to return home to this divine identity, to the peace of the mind of God. It is this peace within me that already is. I don't need to seek for it. I just allow it. It is this peace that shifts and changes the world. It is in this moment that I am at cause. It is in this moment that I am at home. It is in this moment that the sanity of God is restored to me. As Christ in perfect safety, I dissolve into the perfect peace of the mind of God. And I breathe. I accept the love of God. Breathing in, I accept. Exhaling, the love of God. I accept the love of God. And I continue in the silence and stillness with this mantra. And I am home. And I am at peace. So let this be your coping mechanism during this time. Try it on for yourself. Practice it every morning and every night for 5 minutes. That's it. That's all. That when we are restored to our identity, everything falls into place. The hush of heaven falls upon us. And God does for us, through us, and as us, what we cannot do separate and alone. So the invitation is to come home to yourself, to your divine self through this practice. I'm asked a lot, what do you do? How do you cope? What do you do? Can you share something with me? The practice that I have just shared with you is what I practice. It's what I do to bring myself back to home, to safety and to sanity. And as I do that, as I drink of these waters, as I breathe this in, as I'm in holy and sacred communion in this way, the fatigue diminishes and is released. This is what my prayer is for us this week, for today, that the only relationship of value is my relationship with God, that I court this daily, in the morning and in the evening and throughout the day. And please be assured it's already done. You don't need to seek it. You just need to immerse yourself in what already is, because you're already worthy of all of this and so much more. I love you. God bless you. Have a beautiful week. Namaste.
I invite you to join me now in saying thank you, Reverend René, for such a beautiful, beautiful message. It was just very inspiring. You've touched my heart, as you always do. But these True Thought principles bring an energy and bring a vibration that is absolutely recognizable. And you have a gift, and thank you so much for sharing it with us today. I also want to say thank you for being present with us today as mighty companions and as part of the True Thought spiritual community. Your presence is an absolute blessing to everyone in this community, because we hold this energy together, and it's very, very important. It's very, very important to the world. Also, I want to say that I want to invite you now to participate in one of our True Thought principles. It's called Giving and Receiving Are One. In other words, we cannot receive what we're not willing to give. It's the immutable law of love. It really can't change up on you, and it's literally the way things work. We can never receive what we're not willing to give. And so with that said, if you'd like to make a contribution to our spiritual community today, it'll help us to share this word with more people. If you find value, you can make a contribution and you can help us support this community to get this word out to more people. We know that more people are coming, but our contributions, your contributions, absolutely help us to expedite that, to raise this vibration for other people as we reach out across the world. So we're really blessed by your presence, and we're certainly blessed by your willingness to support this community and this ministry. So God bless you for that. What's next? I want to say that inside the message is one of my most favorite things to do with my wife. We literally sit down and we have a discussion, a conversation, a casual conversation nonetheless, about the message that you've just heard. Every week, our inspirational message is followed by a video that we call Inside the Message. And we have a lot of fun. We really unpack some of the nuances of the teachings. In addition to that, right after we do that, we offer you the opportunity to join us for a live interactive Zoom session on Zoom, right? You can sign up for that. If you'd like to be part of our inner circle, that's how you can get a link to that Zoom session. And just go to our website, truththought.org, and there you'll find a place for you to sign up for our email list, the Inner Circle. So just join the Inner Circle, and then you'll start getting emails and notifications about our Zoom sessions, other gatherings that we're doing, other meetups that we're doing. We may be doing one locally where you are in the not too distant future. So certainly would like you to participate in that by just simply joining our email list. You can also find us on Facebook. Please like and share every chance you get. That also helps us to spread the word that this ministry is here to bring. And God bless you for supporting us and your presence. Again, thank you so much. It's been my honor to be your host today. I just want to say, let's join together now for another brief moment of silence. Let's take another good deep breath. Thank you, Spirit, for being with us today throughout this inspirational message. Thank you for being with us in this energy of love. Thank you for being present for us to be able to connect and join you in union and relationship. We are truly blessed by this teaching. We are truly blessed by these True Thought principles. And we are blessed by being in the presence of this spiritual community, joined as one in mind for the purpose of love. Well, God bless you all. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic week, and we'll return soon. Bye-bye.